Imagine you've spent your entire life running from pain, running from loss, running from the quiet moments when everything falls silent and there's nothing left to distract you from yourself. And then, imagine discovering that everything you were running from was the very thing that could have set you free. Think about it. Most people treat suffering like a glitch, an error in the system, something to be fixed, numbed, or escaped as quickly as possible. We have entire industries built around this one idea, that pain is the enemy, that comfort is the goal, that if you're hurting, something has gone terribly wrong. But what if that's the lie? What if suffering isn't a malfunction, but a message? Over a century before modern psychology existed, a philosopher named Arthur Schopenhauer looked directly into the darkest parts of human existence, and what he found there wasn't despair. It was a map. Stay with me, because what comes next will fundamentally change the way you relate to your own pain. If this is your first time here, consider subscribing. What we explore together is not easy, but it is necessary. Here's the truth most people live by. Suffering is a problem to be solved. You feel anxious. Take something for it. You feel empty. Fill it with noise. You feel the ache of a life that isn't quite what you imagined. Scroll past it, drink past it, distract yourself past it until the feeling fades. And on the surface, this makes complete sense. Why would anyone choose to sit with pain when relief is one click away? But here's the question most people never ask. What if the relief is making you weaker? Consider this. Research by psychologist Martin Seligman identified a phenomenon he called learned helplessness, the state in which a person, after repeated experiences of uncontrollable discomfort, stops trying altogether. They don't just become passive about one thing, they become passive about everything. Their capacity for agency, for courage, for meaningful action, it erodes. Think about that for a moment. We were told that avoiding pain protects us, but the data suggests something else entirely. The systematic avoidance of discomfort doesn't build a safer life, it builds a smaller one. And yet, here we are, living in what may be the most comfort-obsessed civilization in human history. We have engineered away cold, hunger, boredom, silence, and stillness. We have created a world so optimized for instant relief that an entire generation has grown up genuinely unprepared for the texture of real life. Have you ever felt this way? That despite having more comfort than any human being in history, something still feels missing? That the removal of pain has somehow not produced the fullness you expected? You are not broken, but you may have been misled. And this is where it gets truly fascinating, because Schopenhauer, writing in the 1800s, long before smartphones, long before the attention economy, saw this coming, not just as a social problem, as a philosophical crisis, a crisis of the soul. Arthur Schopenhauer was not an optimist. Let's be honest about that from the start. He was a man who stared unflinchingly at human existence and refused to look away. He watched people chase pleasure, success, love, status, and he noticed something no one wanted to admit. The achievement of any desire immediately gives birth to a new one. Satisfaction, he observed, is always temporary. The void always returns. He called the force behind all this striving the will, a blind, relentless, insatiable drive that operates beneath conscious thought. We don't choose our desires. We are driven by them. We are, in his words, instruments of a force far larger than our individual selves. Consider this for a moment. How many times have you told yourself, when I get this thing, I will finally feel at peace? The job, the relationship, the number in the bank account, the body, the recognition, and then you got it. And the peace lasted, what, days? Weeks? Then the will woke up again and pointed at the next thing. Schopenhauer wasn't saying this to depress you. He was saying it to free you. Because here is what most people get catastrophically wrong about his philosophy. They stop at the diagnosis. They hear life is suffering and interpret it as nihilism, as hopelessness, as a reason to give up. But that is not what he meant, not even close. What Schopenhauer understood, and this is the insight that most people miss entirely, is that suffering is not the opposite of meaning. Suffering is often the gateway to it. When you sit with pain instead of fleeing from it, something remarkable happens. The noise of desire quiets. The relentless forward motion of want, it slows. And in that slowing, something rare and precious becomes possible, genuine self-knowledge. Stay with me, because what comes next will change the way you see your own hardest moments. Schopenhauer pointed to 3 paths of transcendence, 3 ways a human being could step out of the endless cycle of suffering and into something deeper. The first was aesthetic experience, art, music, literature, moments of pure contemplation so absorbing that the self temporarily dissolves. The second was compassion, recognizing that every other human being is driven by the same blind will, the same hidden aches, the same invisible wounds. And the third, the deepest, was what he called ascetic wisdom, the deliberate turning of the will against itself, the conscious choice to face what is rather than chase what is wanted. Ask yourself honestly, when has your most significant growth come from? From the comfortable seasons of your life or from the ones that broke you open? The answer, if you're being truthful, is almost always the latter. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps and went on to build an entire school of psychology around meaning, arrived at a parallel conclusion from a radically different direction. He observed that suffering in itself does not destroy a person. What destroys a person is suffering without meaning. The moment a person finds why they are enduring, a purpose, a love, a future worth surviving for, the suffering itself transforms. It does not disappear, but it becomes bearable. More than bearable, it becomes a forge. Those who have a why to live, Frankl wrote, paraphrasing Nietzsche, can bear almost any how. Think about it. The most dangerous form of suffering is not the intense kind, it is the purposeless kind, the low-grade, chronic, numbed-out kind that modern life manufactures so efficiently. The suffering of a life lived on autopilot, of days that blur into weeks, of a self that was never truly questioned, never truly tested, never truly known. And here's the most uncomfortable truth of all. You cannot find yourself in comfort. You can only find yourself in the places where comfort ends. So what do we actually do with this? This is not comfortable, but it is necessary, because philosophy without application is just elegant decoration, and you didn't come here for decoration. The first shift, stop pathologizing pain. The next time something difficult arrives, grief, failure, rejection, uncertainty, resist the immediate impulse to make it stop, not forever, not masochistically, but for long enough to ask, what is this trying to show me? Treat it like a difficult teacher, not a broken alarm. The second shift, distinguish between productive and unproductive suffering. Schopenhauer was not arguing that all pain is instructive. There is suffering that builds, the discomfort of growth, of honest self-examination, of choosing a hard right over an easy wrong. And there is suffering that only destroys, trauma, abuse, chronic injustice. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference. One asks something of you, the other needs to be stopped. The third shift, court solitude. Schopenhauer was famously solitary, not because he was antisocial, but because he understood something that is radical in our era of constant connection. You cannot hear yourself think in a crowd, and if you cannot hear yourself think, you cannot know yourself. And if you cannot know yourself, you will spend your entire life being shaped by forces you never consciously chose. 10 minutes a day, no phone, no input, just you and the silence that most people are desperately afraid of. This is where self-knowledge begins. The fourth shift, reframe your suffering as shared humanity. This was Schopenhauer's insight into compassion. Every person you meet is carrying something. Every person is driven by the same invisible forces. Every person has known the specific ache of wanting something they could not have, or losing something they could not keep. When you recognize this, truly recognize it, something softens. You stop judging. You start seeing, and in seeing others more clearly, you begin to see yourself. The price of staying unconscious is high, not immediately, but over time, a life unlived accumulates its own particular weight. The unlived life does not vanish. It follows you. Schopenhauer lived most of his life misunderstood. He published his greatest work at 30, and it was largely ignored for decades. He sat with that, he endured it. He kept writing anyway. And now, 2 centuries later, his ideas feel more urgent than ever. In a world that has perfected the art of distraction, that markets numbness as wellness, that mistakes the absence of pain for the presence of life, the most important revelation is this: your suffering is not a mistake. It is an invitation to stop running, to turn around, to face the very thing you have been avoiding, and discover that what lives on the other side of that confrontation is not destruction. It is you, the real you, the one that has been waiting beneath all the noise. So I want to leave you with one question. Sit with it. Don't answer quickly. What pain have you been running from that might, if you finally turn to face it, have something essential to teach you? If this message reached something in you, share it. Not because it's trending, but because someone in your life might need to hear it. Leave a comment with your reflection, your doubt, your moment of recognition. I read them. They matter. Stay curious, stay awake, and above all, keep thinking. Thanks for looking.